is what we call our home and family safety training. This is our level 1 training. In North Logan, we also have a level 2 and a level 3 training. I'm going to give some time to Bill to talk about our level 2 training, but I want to tell you a little bit about our level 3 training that's coming up, and that is CERT. And I think most of you have heard of CERT. I don't know if everyone knows what it is, but I have a flyer that I'm going to pass around. If you're interested, please take one. I'm just going to start them here. Starts in March, but CERT teaches you how to take care of to take care of yourself, your home, and your family in the event of a disaster. So I'm just going to give you a quick rundown on what you will learn. It's 8 classes, 24 hours of training. The classes are 3 hours long each time, twice a week, Tuesdays and Thursday evenings, and we do them over at the Professional Development Building. Sorry if when I say that word, Professional Development Building. Start it up. And so the unit 1 is a basic preparedness unit. Unit 2 is a fire suppression unit where the fire department comes and teaches you fire safety in your home, how to prevent fires from happening. The fire department will come and will actually practice putting out fires in the parking lot, and you'll actually get to practice with a fire extinguisher. Units 3 and 4 are medical units, so you'll learn stop the bleed, more in-depth CPR, how to treat all kinds of injuries, burns, just any kind of injury. Splinting, you'll learn the basics of all kinds of medical techniques. And that's units 3 and 4. Unit 5 is a search and rescue unit. You'll learn how to search for victims, when to know. And we have some people here tonight, and they were smiling, and they were like, yeah, I know all this stuff. You'll learn how to know it's safe to be able to search for a victim, how to search, how to extricate victims, how to set up a treatment area. Anyway, that's what Unit 5 is. Unit 6 teaches you how. Sorry, I keep spitting on these poor people. I'm so sorry, Cheryl. I know her too. Work as teams. Unit 7 is a disaster psychology. And then we have a terrorism unit, and we do active shooting as well. So you can tell it's a lot of information, but as you become prepared and get this information, I think it will really help you and give you peace of mind as you work to be able to help take care of yourself and your family and prepare for any kind of emergency. So that's what's coming up. And again, if you're interested, there's the contact information is on the bottom of the sheet. Everyone that takes the class has to have a background check.
I want to say with regard to CERT, it's not about building a big team that wears green vests and are aligned with one of the municipal governments in the valley. The first and primary value of it is getting people's abilities to increase, their understanding and education in all the areas she talked about: first aid, search and rescue, evacuation, setting up shelters, fire suppression, those things, to help you where you can help your family and your neighbors. And if everybody can take care of themselves and their neighbors, we're 80% of the way there. And then organizing as teams to help municipalities is the next level up, because there may be one area hammered that doesn't have the ability to help themselves. Thank you. I helped put together a big preparedness fair in Colorado. There was a southwest corner of the whole Denver metropolitan area. And the press came, and we had police, fire, EMS there, and all sorts of other displays. And the media showed up because it was such a big event. And remember, they picked an adorable young girl to interview about preparedness, which happened to be my daughter, Heather, and we'll remember her. And they said, boy, are you here to learn how to be prepared? And she said, yes, I am. Preparedness is important. And I started to swell as a father would. And they said, well, what's the first thing you do in an emergency? And she said, oh, that's easy. Get to Grandpa's house. Or get to dad's house, yeah. And I thought, oh, no, there goes the air out of my tire.
We still can't hear you in the back.
Still can't hear me.
Yeah.
How about this? Oh, I'm back. Thank you. Yeah, but that always stuck with me, because here I thought she was going to be the classic I'm prepared, and her first step was to get to my house. And that was not the right answer. So I've been an emergency manager for an agency in Colorado. I've been a guy that has been trained and sits at the emergency operating center at the state level and at county levels during wildfires, floods, tornadoes, and other things. I've had a calling in the church I never knew existed, the LDS church. was called a dozen years ago by the North America Central Area Presidency to be the church's representative for the state of Colorado for emergency preparedness, response, and recovery, all three parts, and to be their representative on what's called VOAD, VOAD, Voluntary Organizations Active in Disaster, which is when all of the community comes together, service organizations, faith-based groups, and others who are active in helping their communities recover from an emergency. When I moved here 5 years ago, everybody waved goodbye in Colorado, and then guess what? I got called to the same position for northern Utah about 2 months later, and then I got elected by all the nonprofit organizations to be the vice president of VOAD for Utah, responsible for northern Utah. So I never knew the calling existed. I've enjoyed the heck out of it. I've learned a lot, and it's so good when you help other people. And I have a slide, I think maybe in this deck, that shows primary kids loading baby goods into a truck during the millennial floods we had in Colorado, so that other young children had something to eat, and blankets and cribs to lay down in, and those kinds of things. And just to see that makes your heart swell. So why are we here today? If you've watched the television in the last 3 months, as everybody across the country got hammered by cold weather, freezing, ice storms, flooding, tornadoes, and other things, you saw over and over again tens of thousands of people without power. And the one that get me the most is the one on Christmas Eve. There were in the South 40,000 homes without power, and they've been without power for days. Think about Christmas Eve without power. You know, we're so driven by the lights and the wonderful accent and the decorations and everything, to have everything go dark was really troublesome. So I don't want my house to be the only one with the lights on when something bad happens in the valley. And so you're going to learn about how do you prepare for outages, how do you survive outages when days become weeks, become months of power outages. And I'm going to talk to you in terms of no-cost things you can do, low-cost things you ought to be doing, or more-cost things depending on what your circumstances are. If you're a student, and I didn't ask, how many from USU wards or states in the room? Any? No, okay. The demographics changes, and if you're in a retirement center, what you can afford and what you have room to store and what you need changes. So there are modifications to those. Then we're going to look at portable generators. We're going to look at portable solar systems. We're going to look at larger mobile generators and how you would use them, larger off-grid solar, and then we're going to look at whole house solar with battery storage and Generac kinds of whole house generators that are fueled either with natural gas or propane. So you're going to see what it looks like at each level and each level of cost and planning. You're going to find that you got a lot of misconceptions. One of them is everybody in police, fire, and EMS has backup generators. We'll get to that. And if the gas stations have gas, you just get there quickly and you can fill your car up. Guess what? They don't have backup generators, and you got to pump the gas out of the tanks. And there's been a lot of people shocked after long lines of waiting to find out there's no way to get it out of the ground. So we're going to talk about those kinds of misconceptions, the long-term nature of it, and how to be prepared at the several levels. So what's it look like? That's what the country looks like from a satellite or a space shuttle with all the lights on at night. And it shows you a sense of where the power consumption is. And you'll see that we're in the lower level of power consumption. The East Coast, predominantly the South, the Gulf states, and the West Coast are the primary power users, and that's important when we get to some other discussions. There's 160,000 miles of high voltage lines, like you see running along the bench here, that things will happen to, either natural or man-made. We'll talk about that. 5 million miles of distribution lines after they get off the big towers and down into your homes and businesses. There are thousands of generators and transformers and other electronics built into that grid. And essentially, if you look at the grid, there's only 3 grids: West Coast, East Coast, and the center, including the Gulf Coast. And there's only 2 points of connectivity from grid 1 to grid 2 to grid 3. So the idea that just because they got the lights on in California, you can keep the lights on someplace else is one of those misconceptions. This is a chart that shows states. The black ones are the ones that have the most power outages in the longest period. The bright blue ones are the ones that have fewer power outages, and you see the numbers in the chart below. That's the good news for Utah. Utah is in an area that doesn't have long, extended power outages, probably because we don't have hurricanes and tornadoes and other kinds of events. But I might mention that there were 15 earthquakes in the Bear River Valley from New Year's Day over the next 10 days. And that has to do with the water, the weight of the water going into the dry sponge that we had from the drought, and all the adjustment and movement that comes out of that, changing the environment for the groundwater system. But this is good news to start with. We'll talk about how electromagnetic pulses fit into this and how we fare in that. So the average number of people affected by power outages daily in the U.S., 50,000. Now those can be the real shorties, where your lights go off and 10 minutes later they come back on because somebody's generator turned on, or there was an installation of some piece of equipment where they shut it down to interconnect it and then turn it back on. Some of those are real outages. The estimated cost of power outages, when you look at that multi-billion-dollar number, a lot of that is ice cream and food you have in your freezers and refrigerators. Those tend to be the things that get damaged by power outages. We had a power outage here about a year and a half ago after a big windstorm. It hit in, we'll see how that was caused. But there was a big outage right here in the North Logan area that caused over voltage because it crossed wires when it went down. And it blew up, people found their dishwashers catching fire at 10 o'clock at night in their houses with nothing in them, not being on. True story, you can talk to the fire marshals. Smith's store on 8th or whatever it is down there, that's how their heating air conditioning unit caught fire. And they had to close the retail part of the store for an extended period to get that repaired. There were student housing units for the university where it melted, or fused, I should say, the service entrance to the 8-plex building, which meant everybody in that 8-plex had no power of any kind. And their food was at risk, and their babies were scared because they couldn't have lights to shine, etc. So they do happen here in the valley. And they're going up. You see 4 times in this slide is about 3 years old. When you look at everything that's happened in the past year and a half, that number has jumped up again. So what happens, how are you impacted when power outages hit? The obvious things you think about: the lights go out. And if you're asleep at night and it's 1 in the morning and a power outage hits, you may not see that your digital clock goes out. And if you don't have an alarm built in, you won't hear your computer buzzing that the power has gone out, whatever it happens to be. You don't know until later. So that's not obvious. If it's during normal hours, it's obvious. Your security systems, your smoke detectors and other things go out. So you're more at risk than you would otherwise be. Pilot lights go out, the electronic igniter style pilot lights might go out. So you can start looking at all these things. No all-electric kitchen is going to fix you any meal when the power's out. That's why I tend to love my gas stove and my gas fireplace, natural gas fireplace, because with just a little bit of electricity, you can hit the igniters for those to come on, and the fireplace to help keep you warm. Health devices, oxygen generators, respirators, that's a 511 or a 911 kind of event for people that rely on supplemental oxygen and other devices for their health, and all of a sudden those go out. What did it call? Mobility items. I was sitting there when that big power outage hit in my bed in the 0G position. I love 0G. Feet up, inclined up. It was glorious. Everything went out in the house, and I couldn't get out of the 0G position because my bed wouldn't work. And it took a real effort to climb out of that sandwich and get back on the floor and start checking things in the house. And then when it got to be about 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, the power hadn't come back on. And we can't sleep in that bed because you can't get into it and you can't sleep in 0G that well. So we had to sleep in our own guest room, but we hadn't thought of that. Pioneer Lodge had people, they had a lady who they found the next morning yelling from her apartment because she was in one of those chairs that helps you stand up. And when the power went out, the lights went out, the chair went out, she couldn't get out of the chair to be able to get up and stand up. So those kinds of issues come up. Garage door openers don't work when the power's out. You can pull that little red handle and then try to manhandle the double garage door back up so you can get the car in and out, but it's not an easy task. Yes.
Can I make a comment about that?
Yes.
We had that happen in our home, and unfortunately we have a battery generator that we keep powered. And so my wife was able to take that little generator and plug it into the garage door opener and get the garage door open so she could get the car out and go do the activities. Otherwise she would be standing 4 or 5 hours.
Yeah, exactly. And we're going to talk about what are those little devices and where do you buy them and how much they cost and how do you do that. So I guarantee you, I'm never going to get caught in 0G again. And the particular solution for that one is one of those battery packs for computers, not the big tower one, but the smaller ones. And I have that plugged into the wall, and then I have my lamp, my phone charger, and my bed plugged into that. So I got light, my phone will still be charged, and I can get in and out of bed. But it wasn't until that happened that I realized that that's something that I didn't have covered in the house. Yes,
Another
sir.
question from Zoom. Tracy asks, does EMP and lightning protection help with the post-power outage?
We're going to talk about that specifically further into the presentation, but thank you for asking because that's important. Okay, so phone systems are out. If you've got cell phones, they're on until your battery dies on your phone. If you've got the old wire to the house, they go out because they have voltage through them that drives them and causes them to operate. Hospitals and assisted living centers generally have some backup generators, but not always as big as they need to be or as all-encompassing as they need to be. There may be designated plugs and outlets like in a hospital, the emergency surgical suites, the oxygen system, a few other things have backup power, but that doesn't mean that every circuit is lit. In fact, many hospitals have a little color code on the wall plugs. If it's red, it's got a backup generator. If it's black, good night, Irene. So they don't cover everything. Police, law enforcement, the code, law enforcement, fire department, EMS, responder facilities, you would think that every one of them has got a backup generator, right? Look at the print on there. 50% or less of those organizations have backup generators for their main facility. One of the big things right now that Sandy and Alan have been working with me on is how do we build the new North Logan City government building and make sure that we have everything pre-wired and extra conduits and everything so that we can have the backup power where we need that backup power. But that shocks people when you find out you're going to dial 911 and wherever you happen to live may or may not have a backup generator on that system. Okay, then we have water supply and treatment plants. Bad news when the water plant goes out. Sometimes there's no chemicals going into the water and you got bacteria and other things. Sometimes all the chemicals go into the water. And then you have a hazardous liquid problem where there's too much chlorine in the water or too much other additives in the water. So it really does mess with water plants, and that's why cyber attacks are frequent on attempted cyber attacks on water plants to try to see what does it take to turn that into a poison plant rather than a life-saving liquid plant. Electronic banking systems, they generally are out, and you may stand in line with your red gas can, get to the pump, you go to pay for it, and it won't accept credit cards. They tell you to pay inside in advance, otherwise they don't switch it on. You go in there, and they'll tell you, I'm sorry, I can't take a credit card, you can only pay cash. You say, okay, I'd like $40, here's a $100 bill, and they say, I'm sorry, we're not making change. That can of gas is gonna cost you $100.
Are you going to go into detail about these, or should we ask questions?
Yes, no, I'm giving you the bad news up front, and we're gonna work our way down through those. That happened in Galveston during one of the hurricanes. There were long lines at the gas pumps and at the quick shop stores, and they didn't make change, and if you didn't have 1s and 5s, you were in trouble, because if all you had was a 50 or 100, that's what you were gonna buy is gonna cost. Liquid fuel. Natural gas needs to be pumped under pressure. Natural gas gets that pressure from pumps that it runs, and they may be fired by natural gas, but most of the time they're fired by electrical power to pump that through there. So if there's a power outage, it might shut the natural gas supply off for a given area, and you're depending on your Generac to kick on because I got natural gas hooked to it, and that won't happen, so just be aware of that. I also had a habit of every time I visited somebody that's got a propane tank, big tank in the backyard, 200-gallon tank, to go over and I tap it with a quarter, and normally I get as close to the bottom of it before you can hear where the liquid level is, and they say, oh yeah, I need to call them up and have them come out and refill it this year. So, just because you have a tank doesn't mean that you have what you need. You have to make sure they're full. So what causes these outages? Let me see here. Let me skip to the chart here. This one kind of continues on there. This first misconception, no problem, everybody has backup. Do not believe that, that's not the case. Most gas stations don't have a backup power at the pump. I was in a Homeland Security meeting in Denver, Colorado, because I was a member of the working committee, and they identified how many gas stations in the whole Denver metropolitan area had backup power to pump the gas out of the tanks. 3. Of course, everybody in the room wanted to know what 3 of those were. So that's what they were going to go to. The next question I asked was, well, who has priority for the gasoline in those locations? Because I'm thinking police, fire, EMS. And the answer was, well, the number one, the state signed an agreement with Coors Brewery. So they get backup fuels for Coors Brewery, which kind of shocked everybody in the room, because I was thinking police, ambulances maybe. And then the rest beyond that, there were very limited resources. All the liquid gasoline in the Denver metropolitan area, if trucks stopped bringing it in to the state or the pipelines were cut off, would last 48 hours before it was all gone. Diesel, you see the big price on diesel. The good news is it would last 4 to 5 days, the reserves they had of that. So a diesel car looks a lot better now, even though you're paying a lot more per gallon, because it would last a few days longer in the supply line. I asked the question many times, how many of you in here have solar homes? Show me hands. How many of them have the lights stay on when the grid goes down? Ooh, I've had people get angry at me in other meetings. What do you mean? And I explained to them, unless you got battery storage built into major battery storage, which is big and has an expense built into that solar, when the sun's up, it generates what you need. when the sun goes down or the grid goes down, you're out of power just like everybody else up and down the street. So think that you've got to have storage and refueling both. Propane generator pressure, full natural gas rely on pressurized line. We talked about that. There also Homeland Security worries about attacks on those pressurized line way upstream somewhere that cuts your ability to receive natural gas. So what causes the outage? Natural or man-made? These are the natural ones. Usually wind, tree limbs, wildfires, ice storms with ice hanging down on the lines, earthquakes. I'll talk about solar flares in a minute, corona mass ejection, and then squirrels. And that's not a joke. If you could read the fine print, you'd see how many power outages every day across the country are caused by squirrels, either jumping across two hot lines or straddling two hot lines. They get fried and then it shorts out that particular transformer, that particular line. So squirrels are a culprit. Here's the one that got us in Logan for the big power outage a year and a half ago. Mr. Bucky Beaver here. He chewed a tree down. The tree came and fell across the Bonneville lines, across two of the hot lines. That's what sent the over voltage backfeed up the lines and caused the dishwashers to catch fire and the other kinds of things. But that was all as a result of what he thought was a good idea at the time. Now, man-made causes. Some of them are simple, accidental trenching in your backyard. You put a new line in for sprinklers and you hit a power line. Utility company shutdowns, like PG&E, they didn't want to be sued for having any more wildfires in California in the dry season caused by their lines going down in either a thunderstorm or windstorm, so they just shut the power off to people. And I remember in Northern California, the Indian reservation that had a gambling casino was the only entity in a 100-mile radius that had power, because they had a solar grid feeding their system, and people used to take their breathing devices and all the things that they needed to run in the batteries to the Indian reservation to get them recharged. Physical attacks on substations. There were two significant ones, Metcalfe, California, and the Utah-Arizona border. They actually, before the cameras were disabled, got photographs of individuals in like SWAT clothes, all black, hooded, masked, taking down the cameras and then trying to make the plant fail in a way that it created a rolling blackout through the system, overload, overload, more overload, more overload. And that's what, remember when New York, maybe 15 years ago, they had a big outage that knocked power out up through New England and into Canada that rolled like that, and people got stuck in elevators for 30 hours or more, and all sorts of things happened. Well, that's one of the things that you worry about is physical attacks. We had some in the fall. There were two media coverages of plants that had bullet holes in their cases and their transformers, and somebody had apparently tried to take one of them out to see if it would roll. Cyber attacks on power plants. They're the enemy, will go unnamed in this event, but knows how to send the signals required to get the smart devices to open, close, to shift from the right to the left, for the water to drain out of a chilling tank in a nuclear power plant, to do other things. And the U.S. government works hard, along with the power industry, to find ways to protect it, to change configurations, change controls, add safeguards so that you can't have power knocked out electronically with cyber attacks. The good news here is there are a lot of new national cyber initiatives. One of them is up at the Idaho National Laboratory in Idaho, what they had with all their ranges that they had when they were doing weapons-related things and engine-related things. They created an artificial grid with substations, and they spend time attacking their own substations to find out what it takes, what the vulnerability is, how do they patch the vulnerability. So that's an asset. Then there's the cyber command down in the Atlanta, Georgia area on the military side. So here we are with electromagnetic pulse, which are the corona mass ejections. When I was wearing a uniform, I'm retired Air Force, as I mentioned, you'd see these big ejections and then you'd start moving the satellites out of the impact area on the Earth because you didn't want them to get zapped because they were difficult and expensive to replace. But that imputes current. If you put an electric cable in a magnetic current, it'll cause electricity to flow in that line. If you build a winding of electrical, you can generate electromagnetic effect and magnets. So there's a relationship, and there's always been a worry that somebody's going to detonate a nuclear weapon at an altitude and it shows the rings out 1,000 miles up. How big is it going to be? 40 miles up. How big is it going to be? The impact of that, because they want to drive current through all the wires that are out there, the distribution wires, the starter in your automobile, the light bulbs you have in your house, whatever it happens to be. They want to impute current that attacks your way of life and your ability to sustain yourself. The good news is this used to be very classified and you didn't know what they were doing, and I think the rule was you have to have a 1956 or earlier pickup truck, otherwise it's not going to work after one of these events. There was a lot of rumors about that. They declassified that. The Department of Defense declassified that about 5 or 6 years ago, and the data shows that they had actually tested every model of every brand of car in every year for the past 30 years in a classified facility and determined which ones survived and which ones didn't. And there was a lot more survival than they expected. So that's important to know. The other thing is that the sensitive power equipment is in the high population density areas in New England and the East Coast and in the West Coast. And if you knock one of their components out, they don't have a bunch of bench stock to go replace that. And that's why you see these advertisements about power outages. We'll be back in the Stone Ages because it'll take 3 years to replace a part. Some of those are sophisticated enough. I think of a multiplexer that does a lot of things. And they're fragile and they could be a long-term replacement issue. The good bad news is that in the central U.S., Colorado, Wyoming, Montana, Idaho, Utah, our stuff is older. It's not as sophisticated. It doesn't handle as much of that multi-use kind of design. And if it gets knocked out, there are bench stock supplies of those transformers, those relays, those kinds of controls. So we're going to be more resilient. We might get knocked out by one, but we'll be back up online much faster than the East Coast and West Coast. Question was asked about surge protectors. I'm going to cover that in just a minute. So how do you prepare? Here's the low cost. You want to have rechargeable portable lights. I've taken and put a bunch of them on the table here. Some of these are so easy. Assuming this one got charged. This is good because it's like a portable lantern and easy to use. You leave it on a windowsill, it charges itself, high and low. We have another small one that's like that. The good news is you can charge it with a photocell up high, or you can light the room by rotating that over and having the light shine up. You can leave the light shining down and use it to write in your journal about what it's like to live through power outages, because all the light will be down at the desk level. These are lanterns that are hand cranked. They got a crank on the top. They're also a battery storage system where you put a USB cable into them and recharge your phone in an emergency, so you can get power out of it, power into it, and then if there's no power to charge, you crank the handle and it'll generate the charge on the battery. Yeah, a lot of these kinds of tools that you'll find in the Home Depots and Lowe's of the world, you charge them up and then they, well, this one I left it on, I think, on the way over here. They will light up and last a night at least, and then they have a plug for recharging them from the wall or from a portable charger. Here's one that I brought in that is like a backpack charger. I forget what this is. I think it's 10 watts, which is pretty good for a portable charger. And you plug your device in the hub at the bottom, and it'll charge it. You can leave that hanging in a window. You can leave it laying on a bench in your backyard, whatever you want to do. These are other types of portable lights, some magnetic holders. And then these are what I give all my kids that are in college, and tell all my grandkids to save up and buy some of these. This is a photo cell that charges the brick, the storage in here, and you'll get 2,000 amp hours of charge out of some of these. And you can plug your phone into that and it'll recharge your phone. You can do your tablet. Some of them that are a little bigger, a little more mass to them, can recharge a tablet or a small laptop. And again, leave it on the windowsill and it'll recharge itself. And you get to more cost. This is Goal Zero. It was a company based in Utah, down just south of Draper by the penitentiary down there. And they were bought out by another company that, by the way, is Chinese. And I was so disappointed because I bought a lot of Goal Zero stuff and they had great annual sales. And as an emergency manager, I got a discount. This one's 400 watts of output, which isn't enough to run big things. I mean, if you've got small refrigerators, you can probably run it. You can run your home internet system, your security system. You can find a way to plug this in, which we'll talk about in a minute. You might be able to get a garage door open, but it is the next level up. Then they get bigger than this, and you can get them up to multiple kilowatts, but they're very heavy. Even with the new battery designs, they're very heavy. But it costs you more for the more capacity that you want to invest in. I keep thinking you're asking a question.
Sorry.
So, information, this is your information hub. Your smaller battery packs like the vertical one there can keep your Xfinity alive, your internet alive, your computer alive, your printer. If you set it up for those to plug into the back of it, it plugs into the wall or a generator. And then you can keep those systems running, which gives you the ability to communicate, hopefully, and get the information. Mechanical beds and chairs are the small version of that, which I put in there, security systems. And you can use those to recharge the smaller devices that I've shown you here, like this or this. And I often do that with mine. I let the big one get charged, and I charge down the hill. So now, generators. There are, but let me go to the bottom of the chart first. There are solar systems that have 3 or 4 panels. They have an inverter so you can turn the DC into an AC, and you can plug a string of lights, 12-volt lights into it, or you can run it into an inverter and then power some small wattage kinds of devices. The generators that I show, that one there is a bigger one. I'm guessing maybe 1,500 kilowatts, something like that, or maybe 2,500. There are smaller ones that are very portable, run on gasoline. Use them when you're camping, you got an RV, whatever, you have those smaller ones. But again, it's a capacity issue. How many how many extension cords can you run out of it and use to light stuff, or is it got enough to run a small heater, etc. This is a solar charger that I built. I hand built this one because I looked at the prices that everybody was selling the big ones for. And I bought one of those black construction boxes. I bought 4 golf batteries, 6-volt golf batteries, put two of them in series to make 12 volts, put the two of them together to take all that amperage and run it to a 12 volt plug. And then I run that into an inverter that I can plug 110 into to get it to work. My son helped move this one off the truck and got a hernia. Because those lead acid batteries are heavy sons of guns. I think that's probably a 240 pound box that you're looking there. So it's mobile because it's got wheels, but it takes some determination to get it around. But that one, I can run a cord, a 12 volt cord out of that into an inverter, plug my refrigerator downstairs into it and run that. I can run light strings, I can run a small box heater in it because it's got the volts and amps to be able to do that. I built that one for 500. It says at the time they're now buying the batteries because the cost of batteries have gone up probably 650, 700 to replicate this kind of a system. And that panel is a 100 watt Coleman panel. Used to sell them at Sam's Club. Okay, so now we're going to up the game a little bit more. If you want more capacity and the ability to endure over time, you start moving into all one whole house solar, whole house natural gas or propane, wind turbines, different kinds of things. Or you join a community that's in a microgrid, meaning that they produce all their own power in that local grid, which is what that Indian tribe that I mentioned earlier had been doing. So generators, whole house generator, the classic is Generac. The smallest one is probably about 6 kilowatts. Biggest one's I think 24 kilowatts, 28 kilowatts, I'm not sure. The bigger they are, the more they cost, but they're wired into your house so they automatically, when the grid goes down, cut the grid off and power your panel. And everything that's on that panel is now powered by that unit. You buy it to size it. You don't want to turn everything on at once. I found my microwave ate my battery if you run that thing too much. But it gives you the ability to not have to draw and pull 20 red or yellow extension cords all through the house, 100-foot extension cords to try to get the refrigerator in the downstairs powered up. So it's got virtue, but they're expensive. Last time I looked, they're probably 10 to 15,000 installed for the unit and the installation. So that's a chunk. And they rely on either natural gas or propane. And the problem, if you're thinking about one of these, if you figure you got a square house, look for where your electrical panel is on the outside of the house. Then look for where your natural gas comes into the house. 80% of the time it's on the cat-corner side of the house. So if you want to fuel a generator with gas, you got to run new gas line. You have to have a new meter, higher capacity meter that you get from the power company. And you have to run the line all the way around the house to get to where the Generac is. If you want to use propane, you have setback regulations. The fire marshal would tell you that it has to be so many feet from any other structure, so many feet from any living area. And so you either have to get a big tank and bury it by the side of the house or behind the house, or you can go up to about 120 gallon, I think it is, unit that has to be 20 feet from any structure. Yes, ma'am?
Didn't you say natural gas was that you had to have electricity?
No.
Because
This is liquid petroleum. It's propane. Excuse me. This
okay,
is
because that's it. Okay, natural gas. I'm like, that defeats the purpose if the electricity's off.
Yeah. Well, you've got a choice of natural gas or propane. If you got a cat-corner house, the cost difference is such that you probably go with propane, but then you worry about getting propane delivered in an emergency.
That's right. And natural gas has to be under pressure, and so it wouldn't.
Yeah, they're all vulnerable.
Okay.
Everything's vulnerable. You're going to see a couple more slides about that. So you can have small off-grid systems, and when I started looking at solar 4 years ago, and I got 3 estimates, they were all in the 30,000 plus category. And oh, by the way, they didn't know what I was talking about when I said how many batteries we got on here, how much capacity, because they were the ones that were selling what goes on your roof and what offsets your utility price. And I don't want to be a producer for whoever the gas company is that takes my electricity and uses it in somebody else's house. I want to be like I'm off grid. I control what I have, how much of what I have, how much I use. And there is a way to use small off-grid systems with a smaller generator. It's called a Generalink, and we're going to show you that in a minute. And then an off-grid solar system plus a power inverter and a transfer box, which you'll see also, will help you light up 6 to 8 critical circuits. You divert 6 to 8 circuits off your big panel into this box. It gives you the ability to switch it to the generator plug or to the grid, so it's safe for the lineman. You're never going to heat up. Whatever you do, don't say, I got a generator, I'm just going to plug it into the wall over here and that's going to backlight everything. You know, it's going to power all the plugs in this house. Because some of them are 210, some 110, you're going to start zapping appliances, and the lineman on the power pole half mile south of your house that's trying to fix the problem ends up getting your electricity that came through the house, through the panel, back out down the street. So you have to have, code requires you to shut the power to the grid off anytime you're using a generator that's got access to the main panel. Let's see, transfer box, let's look at some of these. There's a typical good size Furman generator. They sell at Home Depot. They got two different brands they sell at Costco. They're good size. This is a transfer box over here. You can see down below are the circuits that I've chosen. And then up above are the toggles that go grid to off to generator. And you'll see the red piece in that plug is the generator providing electricity into that transfer case. Now that only covers 6 to 8 circuits, but I got everything I need. I got enough to run the furnace, or in the summertime a whole house fan to vent the house. I've got enough to run the upstairs fireplace. I got enough to run a circuit that has the gas stove on it. Oh, by the way, the microwave's on that same circuit, so I unplugged the microwave because you get into the habit of doing that and your battery will start dropping or your generator will overload. And then I've got 2 or 3 other circuits, another refrigerator downstairs and a couple of other light television, all my wireless routers, my security system, all that kind of stuff. So I can run that off that panel. This is what the Generalink looks like. Here's your meter on the end here. And what it is it's a different collar. The Rocky Mountain Power comes out and pulls the meter, puts a collar into those sockets, and puts the meter back on and seals it with a band and a tape. And it's got the electronics in it that sense if the grid is on, they don't activate the plug on the bottom for your generator. If the grid is off, it activates the plug for the generator. You plug your generator into one plug, and you've got the whole circuit panel again that you can go in and turn off what you don't want to use electricity for, turn on what you want to use electricity for. That costs about $700, and it has a whole house surge protector built into it. So it'll keep you from having surge damage the rest of the things in your house, electronics in your house, for $750, I can't recall. And it took the Rocky Mountain Power 8 minutes to pull my meter, put the collar on, put that on, seal it all up. They didn't charge anything to do that. They still won't do it, but now you have to get a permit to use one of these because Pacific Power that owns Rocky Mountain Power requires a permit. North Logan has agreed that they're going to do a minimal permit, meaning there is no engineering, there is no inspection, because it's once you plug it in and the lights come on, it's good. And they're going to have a permit fee of about $50. So that'll make it affordable. $750 for the device. About well, if you wanted to put a transfer switch in, those transfer switches are about $400, plus an electrician to rewire everything into that switch. I round that off to about $1,000 for the switch and the wiring that goes into it. With this, there's no rewiring, there's no rejigging, there's no other electrical work to be done. They put that on. You plug and lock your generator cord into that, plug your generator in, pull the rope, turn the key, whatever you have, and all of a sudden your panel's good to go. So I opted to put up the, when they wouldn't talk storage with me, I got upset and kind of quit. And then I decided to go back and check the latest technology. There's a box of rolling cabinets you see on the lower left that has 400 amp hour battery storage in it. And I've added one more to the top. So I've got 600 amp hour, which is essentially 6 kilowatts of storage in those batteries. It's got the inverter and everything there. And it plugs into, you can't see it, but that red plug you saw a minute ago is actually the cord coming out of that solar generator that goes into that 8-panel or 8-circuit block. And it worked great. In October, when we had single-digit weather, I unplugged the grid from it, switched it to no grid, all battery. It ran the whole night, almost the whole night. That's why I added the third battery. Ran the whole night, even if I had a little bit of snow or ice on the collectors. By 10 o'clock, it had melted off. By noon, the batteries were fully charged, and I could go around the clock, which was my goal, with that system for my furnace, my stove. I can cook, I can live, I have lights, I have communications, I have what I need. Unfortunately, this last month and a half has been a bummer, because when the snow tries to get off those collectors, you see what they look like in, I think it was September, with a little bit of snow on the top and it comes right off, and then now you look at it and it stacks up at the bottom, and the snow stacks further up the collectors, and it hasn't cleared in probably a month. And guess what? That cuts my solar content down to half of what it was, and if it blocks any of the top, then I don't get any solar, because there's a control system that shuts them off if you're not getting the full voltage out of them. So that was a flaw for solar, which I thought, hallelujah, I'm now going to be able to go 24 hours around the clock. Now my neighbor has kindly offered to help me put some sheet metal between the bottom collector and the rain gutter, so that when the snow comes off the collector, it keeps on going and clears the roof.
So, back on the Generalink, if I understand this correctly, if you have a grid-tied solar system, you put that Generalink on the meter, you could potentially.
Okay, yeah, well, now you're talking two different things here. You're talking solar or generator. Mine happens to have a Generalink and the solar, and all that means is what I plug into that 8 circuits is either my solar collectors or my generator. Right now, if I wanted to keep the lights on and the fireplace running and the stove working, I'd have to use the generator, because it's incapacitated. The snow and ice buildup has incapacitated the solar. In normal times, I could run it on the solar and not need to worry about using a generator.
Right, it continues. So I have an inverter, for example, on there that feeds back into the grid. And I'm wondering, is it?
This doesn't. There's no feedback into the grid from the solar, because it can't get past that switch, which is only heating those circuits that I've identified.
Right, but with a Generalink, so if I shut off the main grid,
Right.
I've got an inverter that's collecting power from the solar panel. Would that Generalink then route through the cord coming out of the Generalink into the?
Here's a young man who has a better answer, because he's got a boat too. Okay.
So I did it doesn't work for 2 reasons, because your solar system will shut down when there's no grid power. If you're purely grid tied and you don't have a battery backup, right? That's specifically to prevent you from heating up the lines when they're down and running alignment. What you're talking about is trying to kind of hack around it, put your Generalink on, so you trick your inverter into thinking that you're on the grid. Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way, because 2 reasons. One, the inverter, most inverters actually are looking for a specific wave coming off the grid, which the generator doesn't provide. Secondly, if you somehow were able to trick it into working, you're going to be producing power on your generator and on your panels, and you have, unless you're consuming every ounce, every watt of that power, you're going to overload your inverter for solar panels. Your power's got to go somewhere, and it's not going to go back into the generator. So you're going to cook your generator, cook your Generalink, or your inverter. So it doesn't work. I actually did a lot of research on that one because I was trying to find the same workaround. I don't know what the workaround is. I'm still working on myself to try to figure out. I got these solar panels. I'm going to pay another 10 grand for a battery pack. How can I make these things run when there's no grid power? You know, so
Right.
I think.
So let me, you got to add to that?
Well, you have to do an isolated system.
Yeah.
So you would have to do a battery backup and another inverter that you can fall back on. That's the easiest way around it.
So now we're at the end of the presentation with one exception, and we're going to get to questions and answers here. Don't forget cooking, because we haven't really talked about any of those things, and you have to have a way to cook unless you've got your stove connected to gas like I do. And so you do need to either have a barbecue pit, a rolling smoker, external stoves, a tornado stove like the blue one down at the bottom. You put wood in and it cooks your food. But remember, you got to eat as well as have some lights for safety and be able to stay warm. Here's my conclusion. Don't be the black hole on your block. That's my challenge to you. When the lights go out, nothing will make me happier than looking out the window and seeing a lot of houses that still have lights going on inside.
Like your house.
Yeah, and you don't get my address yet. And the fact I live across the street from you, don't give them your address yet. And there's a great book by Ted Koppel that if you want to read what going back to the Dark Ages looks like, he's gone through and did an amazing amount of research on power outages, cyber threats, EMP, pulsing, and everything else, and he tells you how bad it could be. But it'll keep you awake at night. Okay, questions and answers. Yes, sir.
I just wanted to share a tip for people. So with generators, you have to store gas, right? You can only store so much gas without going down. Obviously, you put in additives and stuff to help it last longer. But you can also get a connector, or not a connector, but what's it called,
Converter, yeah.
for your generator, so you can run it off propane or natural gas.
Yep,
So
in
that
fact.
might be something you guys want to look into. That way you can store propane.
Right.
A lot better.
And switch from the natural gas from the gasoline when it runs out, you could switch to propane. When I showed you that Furman that they sell at Costco or Sam's Club, that's tri-fuel. You can switch it from gasoline to propane to what's the third? Natural gas. Yeah, you've got the ability to go with what you've got. Yes, sir.
There's some good websites out there where you can type in your generator and they custom build converters for that specific generator. So you can look up whichever one you need online.
Just know that it impacts the output because you get less output, BTU output or kilowatt output on some fuels than others. So it varies.
Did anybody else want to sign up for the CERT training?
Thank you for asking. Yes, sir.
Propane doesn't go bad, right?
It only happens goes bad is when people forget about it, especially if it's buried in the yard and out of sight, out of mind. But no, it doesn't. It doesn't go bad. Gasoline is an issue, and they do make additives, but you're limited on how much of that you can squirrel away, unless you're continually using.
The other thing is with generators, if you have a motorhome or RV, you know that some are quieter than others, and that may not make any difference, but just in funsies, it does make a difference.
Yep. Yep. My solar is whisper quiet. Yes, sir.
A question about the waste management. So say the power went out for 2 to 4 weeks, how long are we going to be able to electric
We have a whole block of that in the family safety and security to tell you about how to store water for drinking and other uses. That's one of those uses is how do you create a safe slip trench in your backyard? How do you flush, gather and then flush with wastewater that you've accumulated from someplace else? What was it in North Logan? They had the pumps go out for the irrigation, one of the water storage area, I can't remember which one it was, and they put a don't water and water prohibition in August, I think it was, which was a bad time to have it, maybe September. Everybody in the prescribed area couldn't use any water outdoors, had to minimize their use indoors because their capacity had gone down because they lost 2 pumps. I've been in places where the contamination was the issue, so even if you got water, you can't drink it, but you can use it for flushing. So, you have to know what the water quality is as well. Yes, ma'am.
Do you use lithium batteries for your solar?
They came out with a battery breakthrough, bless their little hearts, on lithium ion, what is it, iron? Phosphate, yeah, lithium iron phosphate, LiON, and then pH. And they weigh about 1/3 of a lead acid battery. They're much more resilient. A lead acid battery, you get down to 50% charge in it and you do damage to the cells. These things go a lot lower, have a better operating range, but they're pricey. A 2,000 amp hour battery in that style, about this big, it still needs to be in a rolling cabinet because it's not a hand carry particularly, but it costs $1,100–1,200. Yes, sir?
Batteries cannot be stored on the ground.
Yeah, surprisingly, that's not good for batteries. And you see so many people that have the backup batteries sitting on the garage floor. Put something between it, cardboard, anything, will help prevent the sedimentation in the battery or the corrosion in the battery because it grounds it out a little bit. Yes, sir.
Did we get the EMP question answered?
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
I think we did, yeah.
The surge protector.
Well, surge protector is part of that. Whole house surge protectors are there. You can buy one of those for $250–300 and they can get it installed in 15 minutes. And EMP is not on the top of my list of what I'm worried about in the valley, and that's one of the reasons I love the valley.
So you're saying the surge protector, you have the general link option, so you get a general link that provides a single point for your generator in your house that has surge protection built in. Be careful, they make models that don't have surge protection.
Right.
So you have to buy the one that has surge protection.
It's about $100 more, $650 without $750, but yeah.
And then you can also put surge protection in your breaker box on your main service disconnect. That's something you talk about for about $225 or so. So you can get the full house surge protection.
Again.
One other, sorry, I'm gonna give one other thing, an EMP tidbit. This is something that we learned is that if you want to protect specific devices from EMP, you can stick them in an old microwave. If you have a microwave that burns out, pull out the power cord.
You remove the power cord because it's an antenna. But yeah, I've got one of those and I've got backup. In fact, I did mention it. One of the big breakthroughs in the last couple of years has been GMRS radios for communications. The old family radios that said, oh, it's got 10-mile range and you find that you can't go 2 blocks around your house. Those are gone. They've allowed the voltage to go up from 2 watts to 50 watts on these 8 watts on the handsets. I sit on my porch across the street from him and I can hit Preston and I can hit the south end of the valley, Palisades. And that's with the GMRS radio, $30. You don't have to go to school, you don't have to take electrical engineering, you don't have to take a test. You go online and buy a 10-year license for $35, cost of a hamburger a year. And then you can use these, and anybody that's on them with you, if you've got a radio license, it's called a station license, not an individual license. Anybody that's on with you, as long as one person on there has a license, they're all good. And then it's what I gave to my sons and my daughters and some of my grandkids, because they'll know what channel we're gonna be on, and we got the range to cover the whole valley now. So that's really important. There's one here. This is Baofeng. I bought a bunch of these, and they're over $30. This one's a Motorola, probably $40. I don't know, where are you? Our radio.
That was not going to get you the coverage that the GMS.
Because it's got the old-fashioned wattage in it. Yeah, okay. And if you got a car unit, you can get up to 15 easy and 25 and 50 on mobile units. But that's a whole session on emergency communications. Anything else? Last call?
Yeah, one more question for me. Is there a nice middle ground for someone who wants to get into it but doesn't want to spend $30,000? Can I just do a few devices at a time with an uninterruptible power supply?
That's the whole point we were talking about. When you look at keep the refrigerator downstairs running with its own box, it's got limitations, it's got expense, it's got other things. You start to get to a level of how many of those do you want in different places, none of them big enough. Well, the really expensive ones, $5,000 ones will run your furnace, but not the little ones. You
Is
make
there a
it.
good break-even point where we can say,
yeah, you know,
up to 10 grand will be?
Well, the off-grid that I did, the off-grid solar that I did, including the service entrance, having the control panel transfer case and everything, cost me $11,500, and I get 29% of that back as a tax credit, because the way the credits are listed, if you're running any portion of a building so that it's on solar and not off the grid, you can take the credit. So at the end of the day, that cost me $8,000, a little less than $8,000, yeah. And that's why I wanted to make sure I had one that would run all the way through the clock and recharge, by noon and give me what I needed for the next day.
Bill?
Yes, sir.
So we're more at the $1,000 or lower end.
Yeah.
So we started out with just that battery, the plug-in battery that stays charged, and the generator, and it stays charging. You have about 4 plugs in there that you can put in. So we do that emergency stuff. That's what we open the garage door with, and when we need it to. So it'll get you through the night. It'll get you through, maybe 1 or 2 days. Minimal.
Yep.
It'll help you survive. Buy a Mr. Heater to heat the house, okay, and a couple of tents, so we can consolidate that heat into one room. And,
I got about $500 worth of bits and pieces and individual solutions up on the table. So you do hit that inflection point where you need to go to a different centralized system or a generator or another option. Sir?
I spoke with an electrician, and he said if you want backup, then get a generator. Or if you have money to throw away, then buy solar.
Yeah, I used to be there under the old days when it was also all collection and no storage. And when they want you to be a power producer, like I said, you have 22 panels on the roof instead of 8. And I'm not interested in that part of the equation. So I dumbed it down and got more where I wanted to be. When I was looking at solar, and they showed me the payback period is 18 years, they were happy about it. I looked at him and said, do I look like I got that much airspeed and altitude? That I'm worried about what I'm going to collect in the 15th through 18th year. I'd rather just have something that doesn't run my meter backwards and save me a little on a monthly basis. It lets me be secure that I can continue running no matter what. And that's how I came back down to the solution I got.
Thank you so much for everybody's everybody's participation. And once again, thanks to Bill Tolbert, Sandy Spenlove with North Logan City.
Oh, yeah.
And
Sandy's the best, one of the better emergency managers I've dealt with in over a dozen years in Colorado and here.
Absolutely.
Cares about everybody here and North Logan in particular. And North Logan has been the ones who put together the safety and security courses for their residents, and they put together the CERT team that has helped all the other jurisdictions in the valley. And they are on the leading edge of really dead dog serious about making sure you guys are safe, resilient, and able to recover.